What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Let's get right into it. Paddy Pimblett recently had an unexpected and light-hearted run-in with Sean Strickland at the UFC Performance Institute. The moment added another fun chapter to the ongoing series of candid encounters Strickland has been having with fellow fighters. Just a week earlier, Strickland crossed paths with Nick Diaz at an MMA gym, where the two exchanged a few sharp words. This time, however, the tone was far more relaxed and humorous. As Pimblett entered the facility, the two fighters immediately recognized each other and began joking around. Strickland humorously reacted to Pimblett's appearance, teasing him about his post-fight transformation. Pimblett fired back with jokes of his own, and the conversation quickly turned into playful banter about weight fluctuations and discipline after fights. Both fighters openly discussed how much weight they had lost since their last sparring session. Pimblett mentioned that he had already dropped around 18 pounds and still had more to go, acknowledging that post-fight indulgence had caught up with him. Strickland echoed similar experiences, revealing that he had lost somewhere between 20 to 30 pounds himself, jokingly calling out the lack of discipline that tends to creep in once a fight is over. Despite the jokes, the underlying message was clear. Both fighters take their careers seriously and always find a way to get back on track. Pimblett emphasized that, at the end of the day, discipline is what defines them as professionals, even if they allow themselves a brief period of indulgence. Strickland agreed, noting that the hard work eventually speaks for itself. The interaction ended on a genuinely warm note. Pimblett expressed his appreciation for Strickland, mentioning that he regularly follows his life outside the cage. He praised Strickland for sharing moments with his family and children, saying it was refreshing and made him genuinely happy to see that side of him. Strickland responded with gratitude, clearly touched by the comment. Overall, the encounter showcased a more human side of both fighters, two competitors sharing laughs, honesty, and mutual respect. Moments like these highlight the camaraderie that exists behind the intensity of the sport, reminding fans that beyond the rivalries and fight nights, these athletes are navigating the same struggles and triumphs as anyone else. Before we continue, please like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay up to date with all our latest content. Moving on to another news. Islam Makhachev has weighed in on the recent controversy surrounding Michael Morales' professional record, and the reigning champion did not hold back. Morales is once again listed as undefeated on Topology, but the situation has sparked debate across the MMA community, and Makhachev has made it clear that he isn't fully convinced by how events unfolded. The controversy stems from a bout that took place in 2017 on an Ecuadorian reality television show, where footage surfaced appearing to show Morales being choked out. When Topology learned of the fight, the site initially updated Morales' record to 19-1, drawing widespread attention and discussion. Morales quickly responded on social media, pushing back against the change and disputing the classification of the bout as a professional loss. At the same time, Sherdog took a different stance. The outlet announced that it would not be altering Morales' professional record, explaining that it had reviewed the reality show footage years earlier and determined that the matches should be considered exhibition bouts rather than sanctioned professional contests. Jay Petrie of Sherdog clarified publicly that the fights were tape delayed and did not meet the criteria to be counted as pro bouts. Shortly afterward, Topology reversed its decision and restored Morales' undefeated status, aligning with Sherdog's conclusion. When asked about the situation in a recent interview with Match TV, Makhachev offered a blunt assessment. He pointed out the inconsistency, noting that Morales was listed as having a loss just days earlier, only to be undefeated again shortly after. Makhachev said he personally saw the footage and believed Morales had clearly been choked out in a cage fight before organizers labeled it an exhibition. He added that if it truly didn't count, then Morales would have to prove himself again inside the cage. Makhachev's comments were seen by many as a warning shot rather than a personal attack, with Morales currently riding a 7-0 UFC run, coming off a dominant win over Sean Brady, and sitting at number 4 in the welterweight rankings. A future clash between the two appears increasingly realistic. While the controversy is unlikely to affect the UFC's matchmaking decisions, it has certainly fueled debate among fans. The question now is whether this revelation changes how people view Morales' rise, or if his performances inside the octagon will continue to speak louder than paperwork from nearly a decade ago. Moving on to another news. Speculation is growing around Conor McGregor's future after the former two-division champion made a surprising claim during a recent live stream appearance. McGregor has been popping up on various online streams in recent weeks, and during one of those appearances, on a Roblox live stream, no less, he dropped what could be major news regarding his contractual status with the UFC. According to McGregor, his previous UFC contract, which reportedly still had 2 fights remaining, may now be void due to the organization's new media rights deal with Paramount. McGregor explained that his contract was structured around pay-per-view sales, and with the new deal eliminating traditional pay-per-view distribution, he believes the terms of his agreement are no longer valid. McGregor emphasized that he is the highest-grossing pay-per-view fighter in UFC history, making the shift away from that model especially significant in his case. McGregor also revealed that he is expecting to enter negotiations with the UFC in February for a brand new deal. He expressed strong interest in competing on the rumored White House fight card and said he is already preparing as if a return is imminent. McGregor stated that he remains fully committed to training, spending nearly all his time in the gym while focusing on his health, recovery, and executing his coach's game plan. In his comments, McGregor highlighted the scale of the UFC's new agreement, claiming the Paramount deal is worth approximately $7.7 billion and has dramatically increased the company's valuation. With that financial shift, McGregor believes he is now due for a contract that reflects both his historical value and the new structure of the sport's business model. He also addressed external criticism and speculation, stating that he has learned to block out distractions and maintain a strong internal mindset. McGregor said he is focused on setting an example for his team and his children by fully committing to the lifestyle required to compete at the highest level. These revelations have led to renewed questions about why Dana White recently shut down talk of a McGregor versus Michael Chandler fight for the White House event. If McGregor's interpretation of his contract situation is accurate, it could explain the hesitation. In theory, it could also open the door for McGregor to explore opportunities outside the UFC, including competing under his own BKFC promotion. For now, however, all of this remains unconfirmed. Until an official statement is made by the UFC or Dana White, McGregor's claims should be viewed with caution. Still, if proven true, this situation could mark one of the most significant contract developments in MMA history. Moving on to another news. UFC play-by-play commentator Jon Anik recently shared his candid thoughts on what he believes is one of the organization's biggest challenges, the length of UFC events. Speaking on the Spinning Backfist MMA show, Anik argued that fight cards have become too long and that trimming the number of bouts could significantly improve the overall viewing experience for fans. According to Anik, most UFC events would benefit from featuring 10 or 11 fights rather than the usual 14 or 15. He explained that while extended broadcasts are sometimes unavoidable, the current format places heavy demands on viewers. Anik pointed out that fans are often asked to commit to events that last close to 8 hours, multiple times a year. Even the most dedicated MMA fans, he said, can struggle with that level of time commitment when it happens across more than 40 Saturdays annually. Anik noted that he would personally be comfortable with events running 5 or 6 hours instead of stretching deep into the night. He acknowledged that the UFC has many stakeholders to consider, including television partners across different countries, scheduling requirements, and a constantly growing roster. However, he believes those factors should not outweigh the importance of delivering a more streamlined and engaging product. One of Anik's more controversial suggestions was reducing the size of the UFC roster. He pointed out that the organization now has more than 600 fighters under contract and continues to add roughly 50 new athletes each year through Dana White's Contender Series. While Anik respects the system, he admitted he feels the volume is excessive and not always beneficial for the long-term health of the sport. If given the power to make one meaningful change, Anik said he would significantly cut down the roster by as many as 150 fighters and limit each event to 10 fights. In his view, this would create a more focused, high-quality product that is easier for fans to consume and appreciate. He compared the current broadcast demands to calling back-to-back Super Bowls every time the UFC goes live, emphasizing the intensity and endurance required from both broadcasters and viewers. Ultimately, Anik's comments were not meant as criticism, but as a thoughtful reflection on how the UFC could evolve. His goal, he stressed, is to make fight nights more digestible, more exciting, and more sustainable for everyone involved, from fighters and broadcasters to the fans watching at home. Moving on to another news. Arman Tsarukyan has once again made his confidence crystal clear, this time directing bold words toward reigning champion Ilia Topuria. In a recent interview, Tsarukyan was asked to assess how a hypothetical matchup between the two would play out, and his response immediately caught the attention of the MMA world. When questioned about whether anyone in his division could defeat him, Tsarukyan answered without hesitation, no one. The conversation then shifted specifically to Ilia Topuria, with the interviewer asking how many times Tsarukyan believes he would win if the two fighters faced each other 10 times. Tsarukyan's reply was blunt and unapologetic. He claimed he would beat Topuria 11 times out of 10, emphasizing his complete confidence in the matchup. Despite the bold statement, Tsarukyan was quick to clarify that he was not dismissing Topuria's abilities. He acknowledged that Topuria is an elite-level fighter with legitimate skills and championship-caliber talent. However, Tsarukyan explained that styles make fights, and in his view, his own strengths create a nightmare scenario for the champion. Tsarukyan suggested that his pace, pressure, and ability to impose his game over long periods would be the deciding factors. He hinted that dragging Topuria into deep waters, where endurance, discipline, and constant engagement matter most, would tilt the fight heavily in his favor. According to Tsarukyan, forcing a fighter of Topuria's caliber to stay mentally and physically alert for every second of a grueling contest can expose weaknesses, even in the best competitors. Rather than framing his comments as disrespect, Tsarukyan positioned them as a reflection of supreme self-belief. He argued that acknowledging Topuria as a great fighter does not contradict his own confidence. In fact, Tsarukyan believes that truly elite competitors must have absolute faith in their ability to defeat anyone put in front of them, regardless of reputation or accolades. These remarks add even more intrigue to what many fans consider an inevitable clash. Both fighters are young, highly skilled, and driven, making a potential matchup one of the most compelling fights the sport could offer. Tsarukyan's comments may come across as provocative, but they also underline his hunger for elite competition and his desire to test himself against the very best. Whether fans agree with his assessment or not, one thing is clear: Tsarukyan is not lacking confidence, and his words have only intensified the conversation around a possible showdown with Ilia Topuria. Moving on to another news. Derek Lewis has recently sparked widespread discussion after making eye-catching claims about what he believes has contributed to him being in the best shape of his career. New photos circulating online showed the Black Beast looking noticeably leaner, sharper, and more conditioned than ever before, leading many fans to wonder what changes he had made to his training and recovery. During a recent episode of the Beast and the Cowboy podcast, Lewis offered an explanation that immediately raised eyebrows. He stated that the UFC had provided him with peptides, which he credited as a major factor behind his improved recovery and overall performance. According to Lewis, the results were undeniable, both physically and mentally. He described feeling stronger, more focused, and fully dialed in, calling his current condition the best he has ever experienced. Lewis emphasized that everything in his life seemed to be clicking at once, from his physical health to his mental clarity. He explained that taking the compounds daily dramatically improved how his body responded to training, allowing him to push harder while recovering faster between sessions. Lewis's coach, Bob Perez, echoed those sentiments and provided further insight into what he observed in the gym. Perez praised Lewis' performance during recent training sessions, saying he looked almost unreal in action. He highlighted Lewis's sharp mental awareness, explaining that adjustments were being executed instantly without hesitation. According to Perez, Lewis's recovery was so impressive that he was able to handle intense conditioning rounds and still request additional work afterward, something that genuinely surprised the coaching staff. However, the situation quickly took a turn after Jeff Nowitzki, the UFC's vice president of athlete health and performance, publicly addressed Lewis' claims. Nowitzki clarified on social media that the UFC did not provide Derek Lewis with peptides. He explained that peptides are strictly prohibited under UFC and Athletic Commission regulations at all times. Nowitzki went on to state that Lewis was actually referring to injectable compounds that are third-party tested and certified as permissible by the UFC through True Shield certification. These substances, according to Nowitzki, are fully compliant with anti-doping rules and should not be confused with banned peptides. The clarification helped cool speculation, but the situation still highlighted the fine line between recovery aids and prohibited substances in modern MMA. While Lewis's transformation has impressed fans, the incident serves as a reminder of how carefully regulated fighter health and supplementation remain at the highest level of the sport. Moving on to another news. questions are beginning to surface about which fighters may actually be eligible to compete at the highly anticipated UFC White House event scheduled for June 14. While early speculation suggested the card could be one of the most stacked in UFC history, new information indicates that several major names may be ruled out due to a single but significant restriction. UFC commentator John Anik recently suggested that the White House event could potentially feature as many as 7 title fights, an unprecedented number for a single card. However, that vision now appears increasingly unlikely. Reports indicate that at least 3 divisional championship bouts may already be off the table due to limitations surrounding fighter eligibility. Former bantamweight champion Merab Dvalishvili recently shed light on the situation while discussing his planned return to the octagon. According to Dvalishvili, he is expected to face Petr Yan in a highly anticipated trilogy bout. However, he confirmed that the UFC has already ruled out that matchup taking place at the White House event. The reason, he explained, is Yan's nationality, which would prevent him from competing on the card. This revelation has sparked broader discussion about whether Russian fighters, as a whole, may be excluded from the event. If that is indeed the case, the implications would be significant. Several of the UFC's biggest stars hail from Russia or nearby regions, and their absence would dramatically alter the structure of the card. Notably, such a restriction would likely rule out potential title fights involving Islam Makhachev and Khamzat Chimaev, both of whom have been heavily linked to major championship bouts this year. If neither fighter is permitted to compete at the White House event, it would remove 2 of the UFC's most dominant and marketable champions from what was expected to be a landmark showcase. While the UFC has not officially confirmed any nationality-based exclusions, the growing number of reports suggest that logistical or political considerations may be influencing matchmaking decisions behind the scenes. As a result, fans may need to temper expectations regarding the final lineup. For now, much remains unclear. Until the UFC provides an official explanation or confirms the full card, speculation will continue to swirl. What is becoming increasingly evident, however, is that the White House event may look very different from what fans initially imagined, with several high-profile fighters potentially watching from the sidelines rather than competing on one of the biggest stages the promotion has ever attempted.